Vince Gilligan told us how Pluribus ends. At a London Q&A hosted by Apple and Empire, he said, "Sometimes the best twist is not much of a twist at all. From everything you've seen, you might know all you need to know." He's daring us to figure it out. So I tried. There's a theory fans have been calling the thought bomb, the idea that Carol could weaponize her own consciousness against the hive. I think it's right, but I also think there's way more to it than people realize. If you've watched Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, you know Gilligan has a signature move. He takes his protagonist's profession and turns it into their ultimate weapon. Walter White was a chemistry teacher. By the end, chemistry wasn't just his job, it was how he built an empire, poisoned his enemies, rigged a machine gun in a car trunk. The thing he did for a living became the thing that made him dangerous. Jimmy McGill was a lawyer, a guy who could talk his way into or out of anything. And that silver tongue became his weapon too. Every con, every manipulation, every scheme, it all came back to the skills he'd been practicing in courtrooms for years. Now we've got Carol Sturka, a romance novelist, the creator of the Winds of Waikaro series, fantasy romance novels that have sold millions of copies. Episode 2 is literally titled Pirate Lady because Carol nicknamed Zosha after her own character. If Gilligan is following his pattern, and he always follows his pattern, then Carol's writing has to become her weapon somehow. Okay, that sounds insane. What's she gonna do? Bore the hive mind to death with 489 pages of desert romance? But think about what writers actually do. A writer's job isn't telling stories, that's the output. The job is engineering emotional experiences. Carol has spent her entire career learning how to make people feel specific things at specific moments. She knows how to build hope so she can crush it. She knows which details to include and which to withhold. She knows pacing, she knows catharsis, she knows how to make millions of people cry over fictional characters they've never met. In episode 4, we learn about a fan named Moira from Kansas City. Carol dismisses her as crazy Moira, who sends dumb crocheted hats. But the hive tells Carol the truth. Before she found her books, she was suicidal. Carol's writing gave her something to live for. The hive sees Carol through Moira's eyes, as someone whose words can literally save a life. So, Carol can change how people feel. The question is, what happens at scale? The episode has already answered that. Episode 2, Carol loses her temper. Not even her worst moment, just garden variety rage. The entire hive freezes, simultaneously, worldwide. $11 million don't survive, collateral damage from one moment of external rage. But they recovered. The hive came back online. The system rebooted. That's external emotion, Carol hitting them from the outside. What happens when she's inside? Carol wears a yellow jacket in episode 1. The show's promotional aesthetic is drenched in yellow and amber. Yellow jacket, as in the wasp. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Because Carol isn't just sad. Carol has been accumulating misery like it's compounding interest, and we can see exactly what she's been storing. There's a novel she never published. It's called Bitter Chrysalis, not her cotton candy Waikaro stuff. This is her serious work, the book she really cares about, 489 pages long. When Carol asks what Helen, her dead partner, really thought of it, she gets the most devastating answer possible. Helen stopped on page 137, paragraph 3. She didn't finish it. She read the last 2 pages to see how it ended, told Carol she liked it, and encouraged her to publish it anyway because it would make her happy. But she couldn't get through it. It made her too miserable. Helen couldn't read 400 pages of her wife's suffering. In episode 1, Carol compares Bitter Chrysalis to Finnegan's Wake, one of the most notoriously difficult novels ever written. Helen admits she tried reading Joyce in grad school, couldn't get through it, made her miserable. Carol knows exactly what she's building. Dense, unrelenting. the kind of thing you can't look away from but also can't survive. Now, think about what chrysalis means. It's the stage where a caterpillar dissolves into goo before becoming a butterfly. Transformation through complete dissolution. Bitter chrysalis. Transformation through suffering so intense that the person who loved Carol the most couldn't bear to witness it. That was practice. Carol has been rehearsing the thought bomb her entire career without realizing it. But bitter chrysalis is fiction. Carol invented that suffering, crafted it, refined it. What happens when the hive absorbs something she didn't have to invent? Not a novel, her actual life. Episode 4 gives us the answer to where all this came from. When Carol was 16 years old, her mother found out she was queer. Her mother's response was to send her to Camp Freedom Falls, a conversion therapy camp in Covington, Tennessee. Carol's description of the counselors: "Some of the worst people I have ever known, and they smiled all the time, just like you."
And they smiled all the time, just like you.
She's talking to Zosha when she says that. She's talking to the hive because she recognizes what they're doing. She's seen it before. A group of people telling her she needs to be fixed, that she'd be happier if she just changed who she was, that they only want what's best for her, smiling the whole time. Carol tried heroin around the same period. Ray Seahorn said in an interview with Interview magazine, conducted by her former co-star Bob Odenkirk, that her character was almost suicidal to a degree that Vince and I realized we had to pull it back a bit. They had to dial back how damaged she is. The version we're seeing is the restrained one. And then there's the drinking. Her car has a breathalyzer interlock, the kind courts mandate after multiple DUIs. The hive offers to remove it. Carol refuses. And she survived all of it. She came out of that camp with her identity intact, her armor forged, and a lifetime distrust of anyone who smiles too much while promising they know what's good for her. The hive sees a difficult woman who needs convincing. What they should see is a survivor, someone who's been battle-tested against weaponized happiness since she was 16. And she's not done accumulating. She's still getting worse. Episode 7 shows us the transformation in real time, and I think most people are missing what actually happens here. Day 12 after Vegas, Carol is coping. She's singing, playing golf, stealing art from museums. She takes a Georgia O'Keeffe painting called Belladonna, the deadly nightshade. Beautiful and poisonous. Carol already had a print of that painting at home. She swaps the copy for the original. Fake to real. Reproduction to authentic. On day 12, she's collecting it, admiring it, a trophy on her wall, something outside herself, something to look at. Then we skip 36 days. 36 days of complete isolation. No human contact, no conversation, no touch. Just Carol alone in an empty city, with nothing but a boombox and her own thoughts. Everything changes. Day 48, she stopped singing. The boombox does the work now. She's no longer creating sound, just receiving it. Jen Carroll, who wrote episode 7, told The Hollywood Reporter there's a difference between the rebellions of Act 1 and Act 4. She's no longer trying to drown out the silence in the same way. The pleasure is gone. The fight is gone. And when a firework tips over and points directly at her, she doesn't move. She repositions herself, faces it, closes her eyes, waits. She's not being strategic. 36 days alone just broke her. She's letting the universe decide if she lives or dies. Jen described Carol's mindset in that moment. I don't really care one way or the other. The firework goes off. It misses her by inches, hits the house next door, sets it on fire. And something shifts. This is the moment. Not when she took the painting, not when she started singing. Here, when she was ready to die and the universe said, not yet. The next morning, she paints "Come Back" on her street. While she waits for Zosha, she stares at the Belladonna. Not admiringly anymore, not desperately, like she's looking at a mirror she finally recognizes. Before the firework, Carol had the Belladonna, a trophy on her wall, something beautiful and deadly that she collected. After the firework, Carol is the Belladonna. When Zosha arrives, Carol collapses into her arms, sobbing. That's real. The loneliness broke her. She needed someone, anyone, and in that moment, she wasn't thinking about strategy. She was just human. But here's what happens next. After the tears, after the relief, Carol has to decide what she's going to do with her second chance. The hive thinks they're watching Carol finally give in. They're watching a chrysalis open. The hive is operating on outdated intel. They have Helen's memories. Helen was part of the collective before she died, so they have access to everything she knew. The spare key location, what she thought of Carol's books, private jokes from their trip to Norway. But Helen died before the joining. The hive knows who Carol was. They have no idea who she's become. They're preparing to assimilate pre-apocalypse Carol, the closeted romance novelist who hid her relationship and drank too much at book signings. They're going to get post-apocalypse Carol, the woman who's watched everyone she knows get absorbed, who's caused mass casualties through her own emotional outbursts, who's been at war for 7 episodes, getting more radicalized with every passing day. The woman who stood in front of a firework and let the universe decide if she lived or died. And when it said not yet, started preparing. They asked for the Carol that Helen knew. They're getting the Carol that Helen never met. In the letter from the author that Apple released with Blood Song of Waikaro, you can read this for free on Apple Books, Carol talks about Sisyphus. She's describing her career, the feeling of writing the same stories over and over, knowing they'll never be real literature, but the identification runs deeper. Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder uphill forever, only for it to roll back down. Camus' argument is that Sisyphus wins anyway, not by escaping, but by finding meaning in the struggle itself. Carol identifies with this, and that philosophy has become her entire operating system. This is what makes her different from just being sad. The hive has absorbed sadness before. They've processed grief from billions of people. They smooth it out, integrate it into the collective contentment. But Carol carries something deeper than sadness, a philosophy that says being yourself, even if it hurts, matters more than being happy. A belief that authentic suffering is worth more than manufactured peace. Gilligan loves morally complicated protagonists. Walter White wasn't a hero. Jimmy McGill wasn't a hero. Carol has killed millions of people with her tantrums. Some critics have compared her to a Karen, entitled, difficult, impossible to please. That reading isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. Carol isn't just immune. She's one of 13 out of 8 billion who didn't join. She already passed through a filter that eliminated 99.999998% of humanity. Whatever makes her different, whatever makes her resistant to the joining, it's vanishingly rare. And the show's own tagline tells us something specific. The most miserable person on Earth must save the world from happiness. Not a miserable person, the most miserable person. The show is framing Carol as uniquely, specifically, maximally equipped for this fight. Her suffering isn't incidental, it's her qualification. The thing that makes her immune might be the same thing that makes her dangerous. Carol doesn't have to be a hero for the thought bomb to work. She doesn't have to be likable. She just has to be authentic. A lifetime of unfiltered, unperformed, unapologetic misery. That's the weapon. Star Trek toyed with this idea in I, Borg, weaponizing individuality against a hive mind. A single drone named Hugh developed personhood, and his individuality alone spread chaos through his ship. Picard called it the most pernicious program of all. But Starfleet decided it was too cruel to use on purpose. They abandoned the plan. Carol isn't Starfleet. She'd pull the trigger. So how would this actually work? When someone joins the hive, their consciousness doesn't disappear. It merges. All their memories, all their feelings, all their experiences become accessible to everyone else. That's how the hive knows about Carol's spare key. That's how they know Helen called her books cotton candy. Helen joined before she died, and her memories belong to everyone now. But here's the thing. Helen loved Carol. Her memories of Carol are filtered through affection, through patience, through the softening lens of someone who wanted to protect her. The hive has been processing Carol's secondhand, through the eyes of someone who adored her. When Carol joins, they won't get Helen's version of Carol. They'll get Carol's version of Carol. And they won't be able to stop at page 137 like Helen did. When you join the hive, everything is shared. There's no selective filtering, no skipping to the end. Remember, Carol isn't just immune. She's one of 13 out of 8 billion. Whatever makes her resistant to the joining might be the same thing that makes her lethal to it. Now, remember the yellow jacket, the wasp. Wasps don't attack hives from outside. They infiltrate, they get inside, and they destroy the colony from within. We already know what happens when Carol's external emotion hits the hive. They seize, they freeze, and then they recover. That's Carol screaming at them through a wall. Internal emotion is different, not crashing the system temporarily, flooding it with something it can't process. External emotion is a shock. They seize, they reboot. You can recover from a power surge. Internal emotion is an incompatible operating system trying to run on their hardware. You can't reboot when the software itself rejects the machine. The hive can recover after a freeze. Can it recover after absorbing a philosophy that says its entire existence is wrong?
But the hive needs consent. They can't just take Carol. The virus only works if it's tailored to her individual stem cells, and that requires her cooperation. Diabate explains this in episode 6. They cannot turn us, not without our consent. Which means Carol has leverage, and consent becomes the delivery system. And here's the version I keep coming back to. I think Carol gives consent on purpose, not as surrender, as strategy. Think about the Gilligan moral confession moment. Walter White, I did it for me. I liked it. Jimmy McGill, finally accepting accountability for who he became. These endings work because the protagonist faces the truth about themselves. Carol's version might be, I'm not fighting for humanity. I'm fighting because I refuse to be happy in a world that demands my happiness. So here's where it all comes together. Carol is a writer, a professional at making people feel things. Her entire career has been practice for the most emotionally devastating narrative ever conceived, her own consciousness. She's been building the payload her whole life without realizing it. Bitter Chrysalis was the draft. Camp Freedom Falls forged the trauma. Helen's death loaded the grief. The joining gave her the rage. Sisyphus gave her the philosophy. The yellow jacket told us what she was from the beginning. When Zosha's dying in episode 4 and the hive starts chanting, "Please, Carol," think about who's actually speaking. The alien consciousness begging her to stop? Or billions of trapped humans finally cracking through the suppression, begging her to keep going? What if those minds aren't actually gone? What if they're just buried under there, suppressed, and Carol's rage is the only thing loud enough to crack through? The thought bomb doesn't have to destroy them. It could wake them up. The romance writer defeats the hive through anti-romance. Not love that unites, but grief that shatters. The skills she learned making readers cry over a fictional rogue, weaponized against 7 billion minds that have forgotten how to handle emotions at all. And the darkest irony? She might have to choose it. The only way to save individuality might be to give up hers, destroy the collective by becoming part of it, consent to her own assimilation so she can deliver the bomb. The finale is called La Chica o el Mundo, the girl or the world. That's the choice. And if Gilligan follows his pattern, Carol's going to make it. Watch for Carol writing, journaling, recording video testimonials. That's her building the payload. Watch for any references to bitter chrysalis. Watch for Carol making peace with Helen's memories. That's her loading the grief. Watch for the Sisyphus reference coming back. Watch for Carol in yellow again. Episode 8 is called Charm Offensive. Look at the promotional image Apple released. Carol and Zosha playing croquet together, looking cooperative, looking friendly. Carol's not wearing yellow anymore. She's blending in. But here's what's interesting about croquet. There's a variant called poison. Once you've completed the course, passed through all the wickets, your ball becomes lethal. It can eliminate any other ball it touches. You don't score points anymore, you just hunt. The catch? Once you're poison, you can't go backward. If you pass through a wicket again, you're eliminated. The only direction is forward, toward destruction. Carol's completing the course. And that red ball sitting between them in the frame, the only intense color in the whole image, that's what they're both playing for. If Carol seems to soften in episode 8, seems to play along, don't assume she's broken. A Trojan horse only works if you let them pull it inside the gates. The wasp is returning to the hive, and she spent 48 days learning how to kill it. The show's title is Pluribus. E Pluribus unum. Out of many, one. That's what the hive achieved. 8 billion minds merged into a single consciousness. But the finale is called La Chica o el Mundo, the girl or the world. One woman's authentic suffering might be enough to give the many back to themselves. Carol spent her whole life being told she needed to be fixed. At Camp Freedom Falls, by her mother, by the hive, by everyone who ever smiled at her and promised they just wanted to help. The way she was already broken might be exactly what humanity needs. E Pluribus unum gave them one mind out of many. Carol's thought bomb might give them the opposite. Out of one woman's lifetime of suffering, many minds returned to themselves. Drop your theories in the comments. Tell me what I'm missing. And if you want more Pluribus breakdowns, subscribe, because however this ends, Vince Gilligan has at least one more surprise. I'll see you after episode 8.